computer. Okay. All right. Share my screen. Okay. So we're here to talk about practicum, which is super exciting because that means that you have progressed to the point where you are ready to actually start working with people, which is awesome and exciting. And I am excited for you. So it's one step closer to being done with the program. So I am also very excited to be taking over as clinical coordinator for both programs for all the counseling students, because I think practicum and internship are some of the most fun that our students can have. It is such a unique aspect of a counseling program that isn't always replicated in the same way in other types of like allied health professions. And I just think it's such a learning experience, good or bad, because I don't want people to go into the practicum experience thinking like, oh, it's going to be wonderful and everything I expected it to be. Not always the case, but it's a learning experience and that's what it's meant to be. And it's also that time where you can try things out, try out your theoretical orientation, see if it actually fits with you in real life, if it feels right, and, you know, make mistakes under tons of supervision. If you're going to make a mistake, the best time to do it is in practicum and internship, because you have a lot of guidance. So anyway, that's my spiel. I love practicum and internship. I like teaching it. I miss doing that this semester, and I'm really excited to take over as clinical coordinator. I have 31 slides, which I will make available to you, but I am not going to read these slides verbatim because it's boring to do that and pointless. So program objectives, you can find these like everywhere: website, clinical handbook, student handbook, in these slides. We're not going to go through those. So, you know, the objective really for practicum is to get you that actual clinical experience, right? So we provided all this training up until this point, and now we're basically saying you're ready to go out there and work with live people. For our program, it's 150 total contact hours for practicum. And it has to be completed, the 150 hours has to be completed before you move on to internship. K-CREP is a little bit different. K-CREP requires 100 hours. Our program is different in that we do the 150. So if you read things in the handbook and you read things from K-CREP, it's just going to reference 100 hours. Just always keep in mind that our program is 150. What the placements are. I'm not going to, again, read all this. We just want you to be working out in your communities. We want you to be acknowledging that there's different agencies you can work for, communication between those agencies. You know, networking is such a huge part of beginning these clinical experiences, so that you get to know people in the field. You get to work under different clinicians. Even if you've got one primary supervisor, it's always good to go out and explore other, you know, counselors, therapists, whatever they're called, at your site, just to see how different people work, and that's completely fine. In terms of what types of the type of work that you're going to be doing in practicum. So practicum, I mean, you're getting your feet wet, you know, and we certainly don't expect, and I would really be hesitant to even recommend a site that would say to me and you, yeah, on day one of your practicum experience, we're going to go ahead and give you a caseload of 5, and, you know, we'll just see how you do. And you know, so doing, you know, some of these like in-depth biopsychosocial histories, assessments, career assessments, job analysis, all of this stuff within that's more the rehab counseling side, clinical mental health counseling, really getting into like therapy, counseling sessions. All of that for practicum, I always expect comes later on in the semester, right? So you're going to be doing a lot of job shadowing basically early on. You're going to be working with people and beside people, but you're not going to be doing everything. A good place to start with these experiences is doing those intake interviews, so you can start to build that kind of your unique style and working with people, getting to know people in their first session or whatever it might be. So the intake interview is usually what practicum students get really, really good at early on. And then you kind of move into the other things, the other aspects of clinical work. So when you are registering for practicum, There probably will be 2 sections whenever registration opens up. There'll be, I think there should be 2 sections of the experience. I don't know who's going to be teaching it yet. It might be me. I don't know. We haven't been told. But, you know, whichever one you get into, you know, in terms of prereqs, we're going to be checking that as part of your application process. So we want to make sure that you've completed the courses you have to complete, and that you're ready to go. So when I'm looking at those applications, you're going to be putting in the classes you might be taking in the summer as well. And so just because you haven't taken those classes doesn't mean you are not eligible for practicum, or that I'm not going to approve your application. You know, it just may be that if something happens, if you end up not being able to take any summer classes, things come up. I mean, my God, we're in the age of COVID. Everybody knows things come up. So, you know, it may be that we delay or put off practicum for a semester, and that's completely fine. But just because you haven't taken those summer classes yet doesn't mean you're not eligible for practicum. So, and try to fill out, when you get into Tavera and you're filling out those applications, try to do your best to get like the dates and everything correct, just because if I'm able to go and look at Tavera and I don't have to go back and look at like degree work and dig and talk to your advisors about, you know, whether or not you've actually taken these classes, that just makes my life a lot easier. So overview of it, it's, you know, one whole semester, entire weeks under normal lives where semesters are 16 weeks long. 40 of the contact hours that you get are direct contact hours, direct service hours, and the other hours are indirect hours. And I'll go over what that means in a second. In terms of requirements, it's a course. Practicum, unlike internship, practicum really has some coursework, and there are assignments, and you are going to be doing some career counseling tapes, if you will. I don't know why we call them tapes. Videos. So you will have those assigned to you as you go through practicum. There is a grade that's assigned to you for practicum as well. You have weekly group supervision sessions, and those are basically discussion boards on eCampus. That is what counts as your weekly group supervision. KCREP requires group supervision, and you're required to track it as well. And I would expect that your faculty advisor will remind you of all of this, but when you get into Tavera, there are options for completing that in the logs. They're pretty detailed, and you can set them up to just be a recurring thing. Every week it'll auto-populate into your logs, so you don't even have to worry about it. But so you want to make sure that that's always being reflected on your logs, because that's something that KCREP would look at if they were ever to audit us, you, whoever. Weekly site supervision. So your on-site supervisor is required to meet with you 1 hour a week at minimum. A lot of times sites will, you know, dedicate that 1 hour, but you're getting supervision, you know, every time you're there, you're getting some type of supervision. So if you're getting more than an hour, fantastic. Log it. You know, there's nothing wrong with going above and beyond. And in my opinion, when you're in those early stages, more supervision is better than none, unless it's crappy supervision, but then you need to tell your faculty supervisor that you've got a crappy supervisor in your site. And they can do something about that. You don't have to suffer in silence. And then you'll also have individual supervision with your faculty supervisor. So again, there's lots of supervision that comes into play with practicum. And hopefully that eases maybe a little bit of like the fear, natural anxiety that comes along with getting into that experience, because you are going to have a lot of people surrounding you, your classmates in the group discussions, your site supervisors, your faculty supervisor, me if you ever needed me for some reason, you know, supporting you in the whole process so that it can be successful. But all of these things are required from the program, from KCREP, so they are things you want to track. Tavera, lovely Tavera. I'm sure you've heard good things and bad things about Tavera. If you've talked to other students about Tavera, hopefully you all have purchased it. If not, you need to. And so this is the system where you are going to be tracking everything. So you'll be tracking your application, the contracts, when your site's approved and your supervisor's approved. They will then create their own account, and then they will have access to documents that they have to sign. And then once the course starts, so you'll have a period of time where you see things like your application and the contract, and then you won't see anything until class starts. And at that point, then you'll see, the logs come up. Yeah, Ashley, go ahead.
When your supervisor gets their Tavera, do they use off of what you have, or do they have to purchase it themselves?
Good question. They don't have to purchase it. It just is part of kind of the package, if you will. Yes, they don't.
Okay.
But one thing that we do find is that if supervisors oftentimes need prompting to get on and do things on Tavera, and because you won't be able to see anything unless your supervisor has signed the things that they need to sign. It basically like unlocks a door. Every time a signature is needed in Tavera, it opens a new door for you to move forward. And so, yeah, that especially at the beginning of the semester, that's one of the bigger issues that I see. Students think they can't log in, that there's a problem, and I go in and check and I see that their supervisor hasn't done anything. And so supervisors sometimes need prompting to do that. And that's okay. That's something that you guys should feel comfortable doing, because we're allowing you to do that, prompt those supervisors. There's a learning curve with Tavera. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is a different system. It doesn't look anything like eCampus. It honestly doesn't look like anything that I've ever worked on before. It's its own system. Their support is good. Their IT support is good. I also have contacts on my end, so if people get really stuck and can't figure out things, there's kind of a chain of command you want to go through. You want to go to your faculty supervisor first, loop in Tavera's IT support, and then come to me, or your faculty supervisor can come to me if there's higher level problems and you just really can't, if something's blocked in the system, you can't access things, whatever it might be. So it takes a little bit of time, but I've heard from students that once you kind of get past those first couple of weeks and you get into that groove, you get some muscle memory with it, and then it just becomes, second nature to be using it. I've also heard, because you have access to it later on, I have heard from students that have completed the program, that are applying for licensure, that it's very helpful when you get to that point, because instead of like people like me that have like a literal stack of paper with handwritten signatures on it, and no culmination of hours at the end of any of my logs, you can just click a button and you have a nice spreadsheet essentially that has all of your hours accumulated, and all the information that you need. And supervisors can get back in and update their information. There's like a little button where you just kind of go from a current active student to alumni. And so you're kind of in there as well. So I've heard that it is beneficial later on. So that's my spiel on Tavera. You may not like it at first, and that's okay. But yeah. Also with Tavera, if you have problems, you got to tell somebody. You got to either tell your faculty supervisor, site supervisor, or me, because if something's not happening, if you're not able to log hours in the system, as a faculty supervisor, I would just look at that and say, well, geez, they're behind. And that's bad. That's not a good thing. It's not a good reflection on the work that you're doing. But if I know that it's a problem with Tavera, then we can help you out. So by no means do you need to just kind of like wait and not get an answer. Let one of us know if you're having a problem with Tavera. Any other questions about Tavera? You will hear that word so much. No? Okay. All right, the application process in general, site selection, again, we are in unique times right now, and I've never, in my 10 years of faculty, heard of so many problems with students finding sites, because sites sometimes that have historically taken students have just cut everybody off and aren't taking them, or they've reduced the number of students that they're allowing to come in, or they allow students to come in, but they're not seeing as many clients. I mean, the problems have been very widespread lately. My hope for you all going into the fall is that a lot of that stuff will be worked out, and maybe we'll get back to more of what we were used to with Practicum, in that sites were easy to find. They were happy to have free student labor, basically, and happy to take the students that they needed to help support them. With that being said, I don't want you guys to wait any longer to start looking for sites. So if you think that it is too early to be looking for a site in September, it is not, I promise you. So start looking. Some places that you might reach out to and contact may come back and say, thanks for reaching out, but we really don't make any kind of decision until June, let's say, okay? And that's fine, but you don't want to just rely on one single place. You may have your favorite agency, and you may be like, yeah, I'm gonna, get a job there when I'm done with all of this. But you need to have some backups as well. So until you get something signed and that contract into there in the system, kind of that binds you more or less, even though everything's subject to change in this world. But you want to make sure you've got some backup plans, and that there's a little bit of flexibility on your part as the student. If you can't find a place that is your ideal spot, know also that it's just Practicum. Working at Practicum doesn't mean that that's where you're going to be working. It doesn't mean that that's where you have to do internship or half of your internship. It just doesn't. And so I hated my Practicum experience and wanted to be out of there as soon as I possibly could be. And it was a learning experience. So you can make changes as you need to later on. There's a quote unquote list of sites on our counseling, like on the department website. I really honestly wouldn't recommend looking at it. I haven't had the time to go and update it, and it needs to be updated very badly. And Tavera can also provide some sites too. Ashley, yeah.
I have those sites that Dr. Glenn had me put together too, if anyone needs help.
That's right. Yes. Ashley's been doing some work with Dr. Glenn. And so she's got a nice site list in is it three states?
All through West Virginia. I have 3 different site lists.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Yes. So she's got some sites in West Virginia. So yeah, actually that might be a good thing.
I can email them to you when we're off here tonight.
Yeah. And then I'll have them for people that might need it. Thank you. I appreciate that. Also in that same note, if you're interested in working at a site in West Virginia that is a substance use disorder treatment facility, let me know, because Dr. Glenn's got some scholarship money that she has through the SOAR grant. And so there might be some options to get some funding for that. So just let me know if you're interested in working in a site. It has to be in West Virginia. That's the caveat with it. Okay, I'm like stuck on slide 12 forever here, but also it is a little bit of a common misconception that we have like quote unquote approved sites, and those are the only ones that you have to look at. Yes, there are sites that have been previously used and that have been approved by Dr. Mambaleo. Regina did it before Dr. Mambaleo did it. And so those are sites that we know they've been properly vetted, really, more or less. We know that they're good sites, they're quality sites. We feel comfortable sending our students there. But just because you don't see that there's a site listed in Tavera, just because you don't see it on any of the lists that we might make available, doesn't mean that you can't apply for your clinical experience at a new agency. There are sometimes steps that need to be taken in order to get a student placed in a new agency. Sometimes they require affiliation agreements or contracts. And so on that end of it, it's a matter of those agencies working with me and me sending things to WVU's legal department and my dean. And so it takes time. So if you are interested in working for an agency that is not on Tavera, it's, relatively new agency, whatnot, just make sure that you're allowing enough time. I say a minimum of 2 weeks is required to review those requests. I mean, we could do a little bit longer or shorter need be, if you're really in a bind in August, I'm going to, really be helping you out and trying to get the ball rolling. But I also need just basic information about the site and the agency, website information, who your possible supervisor might be, what their credentials are, and all of that goes into the process of approving a site that maybe a student has not ever used before. Questions about that? About sites in general?
You
What
said,
would be,
Good.
go ahead, Ashley.
just real quick, you said for mine, you just needed the supervisor.
CV, resume. Yep.
Thank you. I keep wanting to say transcript, and I was like, that's not the word I'm looking for. My brain is
Like
done
the
today.
actual transcript.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
So I work at the CED now, and I've talked to them about the potential for doing my practicum there.
Yeah.
But what would be the first step in that process? So they say it's a great idea and they're all for it. I just don't know what would be the actual first step.
Okay. So you're like an actual employee at the CED right now?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What program is it with?
The traumatic brain injury program.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. I mean, we're familiar with them. I don't know that they're in like the Tavera system yet. If you know who your supervisor would be, I would say the next step would just be to make sure that supervisor meets all the supervisory credential requirements. If that's the case, and they're able to support you in terms of hours, and the type of work that they're doing, then, that's one that we're more familiar with, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were a little concerned. They just wanted me to check and make sure that it was possible for me to do it at a place that I was working and for it to be paid.
Yes, that's a very good question. That I will skip over that slide when I come to it because I'll just talk about it now. So yes, you can do both your practicum and internship at a place of employment, and you can be getting paid. We've had people that are offered a job midway through internship, which is fantastic and phenomenal, right? That's what we all hope, is to get employed, right? To be working. If you are going to be doing that, the only thing that we do need that's a little bit different is that we need a statement of new learning. That's what it's called. And so everybody is going to be doing objectives when they get ready. At the first couple of weeks of a practicum and internship, you're going to be developing objectives with your supervisor. For those that are actually working at that place, the site, the agency, you have to, in addition to those objectives, identify new learning. And I'll send out a document that kind of outlines what that might look like. But it's basically a way for you to talk with your supervisor and say, I need to have an experience that's different than my everyday experience, and even when you get into like internship, a lot of times it's a little bit more difficult or tricky to find that new learning if you're working full time and doing internship there. But I would say don't worry about that just yet. But you're not prohibited from working at the practicum site and getting paid. Even better, because working for free is difficult.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so indirect and direct hours. I'm going to be brief about this because you're going to get more into it when you get into class and when you're looking at the Tavera logs and you're actually getting in and doing the work. Indirect service hours are really easy for everybody to get typically. That's doing case notes, that's any kind of meetings, documentation, classwork that you might be doing, preparation for like a presentation, basic training. Indirect hours are any time basically that you are not sitting with a client and doing work. So there's tons of indirect hours because case management type work, making phone calls, responding to emails, because a lot of times now people are using email correspondence more than they were before. All of that is going to be indirect hours. Anything that is, there's some more workshops, presentations, research, class related work. The group supervision that you're going to get, that's indirect hours. Supervision in general is indirect hours. So yeah, like I said, you generally get a lot of that. Did I not put a direct hour slot in here? I swear I must have at some point. Well, direct hour. Maybe I clicked delete too early on one of them. Direct hours are the times that you're meeting one-on-one with clients. That does mean if you're talking on the phone, that's direct hours because you're communicating directly with somebody. If you are on Zoom or some other platform that somebody is using at an agency now because of COVID, that's direct hours. That is perfectly fine. If you are working, let's say, if you're trying to think of something that's a little bit unique. I don't know if you were working in the schools for some reason, if you're doing like an IEP meeting and coming along with the counselor, direct hours, because the client's there, the students there, you're working as a team. Direct hours are a little bit harder to get because, you know, you got to be sitting there with somebody. But 40 is not a lot in practicum. It's not. I would say if, so you can get more than 150 hours in practicum. Nothing wrong with that. You have to complete practicum throughout the semester. You can't cut it off early. If you hit 150 hours, like 10 weeks in, you can't say, well, I'm done. I hit my hours. I'm good. So you have to keep going throughout the entire semester. If you're able to get a little bit more of those direct hours, indirect hours early on, don't say no to that. You know, try to get those because things happen at the end of the semester. You know, you could come down with the flu or God forbid COVID. I mean, you could come down with anything and need to miss work for a week, right? So if you can get some of those hours early on, I always say get the hours early on. And anytime you have the opportunity to do direct hours, you can. Like I said earlier, if you're able to work with other clinicians, other counselors in an agency, that's perfectly fine too. It's just that you have to continue to go back and work with your supervisor who would sign off then on those hours that you did them. Questions about direct or indirect hours? No? Okay. Site supervision, all of this is outlined in the clinical handbook. And this is information that I really just would want you to go over with a potential site supervisor. Really, you can send them the clinical handbook. And I say that I'm also going to tell you that I'm updating it right now. So, you know, I would say maybe wait until it's updated and then they have the most up-to-date information. And I'll let you guys know, of course, whenever that gets updated. You know, site supervisors are an integral part to the whole process, and we really appreciate the work that they do because it is work for them and it's not paid work for them. You know, we do have some expectations that they're going to be supervising you, especially in practicum, that they're not just going to be putting you out there and saying, you know, do whatever you need to do and come back and chat with me before you go. You know, so there is an expectation they're going to be reviewing the work that you're doing, listening to tapes, if that's something that they do as part of their supervision, providing you with feedback, completing different evaluations in Tavera and letting us know, letting your faculty supervisor know how you're doing. I check in with my site supervisors at least 3 times throughout the semester. I'll do just an individual call to site supervisors or a Zoom call and talk with them and really make sure that you know, that the student is progressing as they should, address any concerns. And so there is a lot of engagement on the part of the site supervisor. Other things about the site supervisor. So a site supervisor does not have to have an LPC. It is helpful because that makes it easier for me to say, yeah, that's an approved supervisor. A site supervisor does need to have a master's degree in counseling or counseling related program with not a recent graduate. So that's another little key point to make about site supervisors. They have to have graduated after 2 years. We give them 2 years of actual experience before we say you could be a site supervisor. They have to be credentialed in some way. So that could be the NCC, the CRC, it could be a licensed social worker, but there has to be some credential that counselor has. And typically after a counselor's worked for 2 years, they do have some type of credential at the end of the name, right? And so, but again, it doesn't have to be an LPC. It doesn't have to be the CRC, but they do have to, you know, have some type of credential in general. Things to think about when you're finding an actual site. You guys did some work already in 600 on finding and selecting sites. So hopefully you're not just starting out from scratch. Just make sure that you, that it's actually covering some of the specialty areas. You know, some sites might seem like they're doing counseling type work. There's one that's, I was talking with the student with recently. It was like the Human Performance Lab under WVU Medicine, and they do a whole lot of neat stuff, but it's not counseling. And so just because an agency is there and available, they may not be doing counseling, and that is part of what this experience is. So that it does need to be a good fit. Make sure that You know, there's a diverse group of clients. Again, that's really for your own learning. You want to make sure that you're really looking at the type of services that are being provided to clients. You know, is it just that they're doing like referrals to other agencies, or are they, you know, providing kind of that full blown counseling process with an individual? Like I said, there's other clinical experience sites that are on these lists, but you could always look at that. Discuss any options with me, your advisor, of course, to just get some general answers about them. If you have questions about a site, like I said, send me a website and usually I can take a quick look at it and give you kind of feedback or things that you might need to consider asking a potential site supervisor. And we also have site evaluations that you can look at if you really want to know how a site did, if it's a previously used site. You again want to make sure that you got a qualified supervisor that can be working with you. Always a good idea to ask these questions of them. What is their theoretical orientation? What is their orientation to supervision? You know, is the supervisor going to be there? Because if they're not there providing you with supervision for a week, it has to be made up either by somebody else on the site, or you have to tack on extra faculty supervision for that week. So we can't just let it go. You know, you still have to make that supervision up. So, you know, you don't want somebody that's just taking like a ton of vacation in the fall semester because they can. You also want it to be a good fit for you. We don't want you to be unhappy. You know, you want it to be, I would never have picked a place where I had to work with kids because I'm not a huge fan of them. So, you know, you just want to make sure that it's a good fit for you, that you're not going to be miserable going in every single day. You know, be thinking, can I use this site for internship? It does make your life a little bit easier if you can. I will say that. You know, a lot of times sites will kind of expect that. So that is a very good question to ask the site. You know, if you do your practicum there, is there an expectation that you also stay for internship? A lot of sites put time and effort and energy into training practicum students, and there's that expectation that they will then continue to work with them for internship. There's definitely competition out there, especially for those of you in Morgantown. Is that everybody? Everybody that's on here right now is in Morgantown, right? So there's competition. I mean, you're competing. I hate to use that word, but it is the truth. You know, you've got people that are from the clinical mental health program, psych, social work, you know, all across the board. So you want to put your best foot forward. Jaden, question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like driving back from Georgia. It's a long story, so I was like zooming in the car. But I'll be in Texas, so that's gonna like, I guess, raise new issues because from what I understand, no one's really done one in Texas.
Okay.
I reached out to Regina and Dr. M last semester, and they gave me like a small list. I think there was only like 3 or 4 in my area.
Okay.
So are there going to be any potential issues with that? The fact that I'm going to be very far away in a new area for everybody.
So no potential issues in terms of, you know, where you're located. You know, that to me is a non-issue, right? We got students across the country, so that's not a problem at all. I mean, as far as finding a site, yeah, it's not a problem. It's just going to be a little bit more effort, I would say, on your part to find the site, to find potential sites. You know, we can certainly talk through that if you want. You know, there's ideas that I generally have for people when they're looking for sites. You know, you definitely want to kind of set a radius around where your home base is to see how far you'd be willing to travel. Is it in a rural area, or are you by any kind of city in Texas?
Oh, I mean, it's El Paso, so it's a decent sized city.
Okay.
Yeah. I just from what I've already looked into, the issue is going to be that a lot of places down there require you to speak Spanish, which I do not.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it might just be a matter of like cold calling those agencies, potential sites, and seeing, you know, what you know, what the guidelines might be for students, even if they'd be a little bit relaxed on it. If they're taking students, of course, as well. So Yeah, and I would say to broaden kind of the arena as well. You can do behavioral health. That's another thing too. You really, in terms of what type of site, what type of agency, there's a lot of different options. It could be the Department of Rehab Services. It could be a facility that's specific to working with individuals with intellectual disabilities or assistive technology or substance use treatment facilities. It can be, adolescent, older adults. The population can be pretty varied. So sometimes it's just a matter of digging to try to find a appropriate site, I guess you could say. But like I said, if you do have trouble in really locating a site that will take you, reach out, to me and your advisor, and we'll, kind of work you through the process and get you where you need to be.
Okay, and then this kind of touches on something I think I understand, but just wanted to verify. I should be reaching out, since like none of these sites are going to be like quote unquote approved. I should be reaching out to you to run all the sites by you first before applying to anything.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, make sure to run it by me. And then, let's say hypothetically, you found a site that I think would be a great fit. I checked out the website. It seems like it'd be a well-rounded experience. My next step direction would be to reach out via email to a potential supervisor, admin person, whoever, include me on the email so that they have my contact information if they have questions or concerns. And then, kind of move forward from there and seeing what their process is for accepting applicants.
Great, perfect.
Yep. Okay, and also, again, I hope things are a little bit back to normal, maybe by fall, but you definitely want to see what changes have been made at agencies because of COVID. If it is that they're doing virtual sessions, if it is that they're seeing clients in person, what does that mean for you? What type of safety precautions are being made? All the questions that you might think of related to COVID, I would say ask at the onset to make sure you're comfortable working in that setting as well. I have had problems with students, especially in my intern group last year, that like agencies that saw clients typically in the evenings were now able to see clients all throughout the day. And I had a student that had a full-time job during the day. And so she went into it thinking she would see all of her clients in the evening, but oh, wow, look at that. Their days were freed up. And so she had a hard time getting those direct hours because of that, because the agency was working with their clients in availability and opening it up, which is a good thing. But on the flip side of it, it really limited when she could actually see clients and get those direct hours. Other things. So the semester calendar, like I said, you're working with whatever the semester calendar is. I don't know what the semester calendar is in the fall yet either. So, if for some reason the semester was 10 weeks in the fall, you're going to be working with 10 weeks. But, there is some, if you needed to do some things to figure it out because of COVID, there are COVID related accommodations that we're hoping maybe is expanded into the fall, but we're not going to touch that unless we have to. But just know that if you're starting in the fall semester, you're just going throughout the fall semester and working, even if you get 150 hours earlier. Liability insurance is something you have to have. And so everybody needs to be going through the ACA. There's a student membership option, which is a lot cheaper than the professional option, but you do have to have proof of liability insurance. It's more or less an assignment. We have to get you to upload that proof of that insurance into Tavera within the first couple of weeks. So it's something just to be thinking of now. I would wait on it a little bit because typically it covers you for an entire year. And so you want to make sure that you're getting it and it'll cover you through practicum and internship, right? Unless you really feel like buying it again unnecessarily. So just keep that in mind that it is something that you will need. General professionalism. You want to make sure in those initial communications with sites that, again, you're including me in correspondence with those sites, not that I have to be in the forefront. I just want to know that you're reaching out to a potential site, asking to have, asking to be placed there, whatever it might be, asking how the application process goes. It helps me know where people are kind of headed. It lets me know that you are working towards getting a site placement. And again, if people have questions, typically those sites might come back to me anyway. I have definitely had email correspondence with potential sites to clarify things. I've had Zoom calls with students and potential sites to talk about whether or not the site is a good fit. So I'm open to doing all of that because, again, I don't want there to be any question that that site is a good fit for you and it meets all the requirements for the program and for KCREB. You know, if it doesn't or it didn't for some reason and you start working there, it's basically wasted time, and you know, don't want any of that. So include me in those initial communications, include, you know, up-to-date resume, CV if you've got one. Make sure you're presenting yourself well. You know, it is an interview. It might seem a bit informal and it may be like, hey, I'm just a student coming in for practicum. It's 150 hours, but you know, remember this, you're making those connections with people that are working, and whether or not you're going to be at that place for practicum doesn't mean that you might not be there for internship or that you might want to go back one day and look for a job at that agency. So just always make sure that you're representing yourself, you know, the best that you can. Make sure when you get to the site that you're familiar with all their policies. A lot of times they will obviously put that into, you know, your first week training, which you can count as indirect hours. But, you know, make sure you're familiar with policies regarding like dress codes, conduct, use of titles, contact with clients, any safety precautions they might have in place. You know, make sure you know what, you know, time you're expected to be there and how long you're expected to stay, lunch hour, timeframes, things of that. And my final, I think I've talked about this in every class, is to check your social media sites. If you don't think that they'll check you out, even as a student, they're going to check you out. Okay. And so make sure your social media sites are either on secure lockdown or non-existent, or that you're representing yourself as you would hope a potential employer might see you on those social media platforms. I'm not going to go through all these other logistics and requirements. Okay. Basically what I'm going to be saying with these is that, you know, if it's a snow day, you got to work it out with the site. If you're sick, you got to work it out with the site. You know, those hours have to be made up if you expect to get 10 hours a week and it's a bad snowstorm like it was last week in Morgantown, you know, and you don't have those hours and you were scheduled for those, well, guess what? You got to make them up in the next week or at some point in the near future, right, to get those back. So be working with your sites to figure out what their policies are, know who to call if you're not able to come in on a day that you had been scheduled, you know what to do if you know, if you're sick or need a call or whatever it might be. Just because the university is on a break doesn't mean that you're on a break in practicum and an internship. This is more of a bigger deal in internship whenever we have things like spring break. You know, so if the university is closed for some reason for a holiday and your agency is open and that's the day that they need you there, then that's the day that you go to that site and put in those hours. Or if they're closed for some reason, that's fine, they're closed. Typically in the fall, Thanksgiving is the one that comes up the most, right? Agencies are closed during Thanksgiving, and so that it is what it is. Went over the compensation thing. You can get paid for it if you're lucky, great. It's just not guaranteed. Clinical experience handbook, you can look at it now. I think the one that's on the website last was updated in 2018. And so the only, you know, I was reading through it and seeing what changes I need to make. And a lot of the timeline that's outlined within that handbook doesn't really apply to you guys because that was written before we had a spring cohort coming through. And, you know, it just is a little bit off. So I'll be sure to try to get that updated and out to you guys sooner than later. So you can, again, share it with those site supervisors so that they're fully aware of what they're expected to do. You know, in terms of grading and evaluations, there are some evaluations that go into Tavera. You're going to get like a midterm evaluation. Your faculty supervisor is going to be evaluating you. At the end of the semester is when you put some evaluations in. And essentially grades can't be entered from your faculty supervisor until all of that is done, until all your logs are in. And part of what we grade you on is getting those logs in a timely manner. And so, you know, we understand that things happen. On Tavera, I can see that my students have completed a log, but they're just waiting for their site supervisor to sign it. And when I look at that, that's different to me. That is what it is. I can get on the site supervisor. I can send them an email and say, you know, I really need you to get on signing these logs for your student. But I need my students to be putting those logs in and keeping up to date on a weekly basis. So I typically don't let my students get behind more than a week without having a really good excuse. So you're going to be hearing from me a lot. Other faculty supervisors might be a little bit more lenient. I'm not sure. But you want to make sure you're getting your logs in so that we're really seeing a good reflection of where you stand in your hours. We want to see about half of those hours completed by midterms in any semester. And if they're not, then that's when I'm really starting to have conversations with my student to figure out why we're not getting the hours, looping in the site supervisor to figure out if we can, you know, vamp those up and be at the end of the semester, because we can't enter grades in until all the hours are complete and the evaluations are complete too. So. Yeah, that's my spiel. Oh, 52 minutes. I gotta cut that down somehow. All right. Oh, all right, questions. What questions do you have? Anything lingering? I should play the Jeopardy music.
So is the next step then to get in contact with you about sites that we're interested in, and then you say, okay, yeah, go ahead, or no, not that one?
Yes, exactly. Good question. Next steps. Yes. So if you, all the faculty, all the advisors should know that you might be reaching out to them to do like a quick, you know, touch base on what your thoughts are, or if you're struggling and finding a site advisor is the first place to go to start kind of narrowing your ideas down. If you're at that point where you've got like, you know, 4 or 5 different sites that you're really thinking that you that meet the criteria, that have a potential supervisor for you, yep, that's where you bring me into it. So send me an email. Let me know what those sites are, provide, again, websites, any additional information if you talked to somebody in the past there, and then I'll provide you with next steps. There's some sites, especially in Morgantown, like Chestnut Ridge, for example. Our students go to Chestnut Ridge, have great experience. There's one single point of contact at Chestnut Ridge that I would give you. And so it's not just a matter of like finding a counselor on their website. It's, you know, the one contact that handles everything. So definitely send those emails to me, and then I'll go through them and let you know what to do next. And then you just move forward. And once you've kind of singled in on one, then you can, then we'll talk about reaching out to a supervisor, getting all that set. The first thing that you do is that application on Tavera. And so that's different from a contract. Your application doesn't include any information. I think there's this area where it can include information about what potential site you want to go to, but other than that, it's just a matter of you filling in a lot of information about classes that you've taken to make sure that that you've met the prerequisites for taking practicum. So do the application now. And then, you know, the site contract, which the site supervisor would sign, that comes later. And that I hope everybody can get those completed. I'm shooting by the end of the semester, honestly. You know, unless you're working with a site that isn't going to be, you know, putting anything set in stone until the summer. But my goal for you all would be to have you know, either set in a placement or very, very close to it by the end of the semester. That way everybody can enjoy their summer. Taking 4 classes, some of you. Other questions? Okay, all right, well, that's all I've got. If you guys need anything, if anything comes up, you can always email me with additional questions. That's completely fine. So I'm here to help, and I'm confident that you guys will get into sites and, you know, move on to the next step. And with that, I will stop sharing and stop recording and let you all go back to your lives this evening. See y'all later.